So I'm calling the meeting to order at exactly 7 o'clock. And we have regrets from Barb Sear. That's the only regrets I've received so far. I would like to welcome our newest member, Topaz, who is representing the Salbona Afrocentric Circle of Support. So welcome, Topaz, to our another meeting. And should we go around and introduce ourselves? Okay. So just before we do the acknowledgement of the traditional territory, we'll go around very quickly and we'll say our names again so that Topaz gets to know each and every one of us. So your name and the organization you represent. We'll start at the end.
Hi, I'm Nicole Bucket. I represent the Fragile X Research Foundation of Canada.
I'm Carol Ogilvie, and I'm with Learning Disabilities Association of Peel Region.
I am Jeff Clark. I'm the school board trustee for wards 9 and 10 in Mississauga.
I'm Susan Benjamin. I'm school board trustee for Ward 5 in Mississauga, Moulton.
My name is Kayla Prasad. I'm the Battle Literacy and Knowledge Mobilization Facilitator with the Leadership Unit.
My name is Fawzia Raza. I represent Autism Ontario.
And I'm Shelley Foster, and I represent Voice for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Children.
Stephanie, Superintendent, Special Education and Social Emotional Learning.
Nicole Fernandez, the minute taker.
I'm Anne Smith from Brampton, Caledon Community Living.
Seth Wilson, Joe Hall, trustee from Brampton, wards 9 and 10.
Hi, I'm Angie Lister, and I'm with Down Syndrome Association of Peel.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Knight. I represent Teachers Sales Ontario.
Paul Silva, Associate Director of School Improvement and Equity and Responsibilities with Innovation Research, Special Education, and I forget what else.
Did you want to go in the back? Sorry, did you want to go in the back too?
Yeah. Hi, I'm George Solmitis. I'm a coordinating principal of special education here at Peel District School Board.
And Kathy?
Okay. I'm Catherine Lockyer. I'm General Counsel and Governance Officer for the board.
And the lovely one who toddled in. Come on, introduce yourself.
Jassy Gill, Ontario Parents for Visually Impaired Children.
Thank you, Jassy. And we have an alternate on the side.
Hi, I'm Leah Malville. I'm the Executive Director at the Learning Disabilities Association of Peel Region.
Thank you, Leah.
Thanks.
All right, I know it's a lot of names, but you will get to know us slow but sure. All right, so item 1.1 is the acknowledgement of the traditional territory, and are we doing the, what you call it again? Okay. We're going to do something. We're going to do the show at the beginning, at the front.
The land upon which we work, live, and sustain ourselves is the ancestral and treaty lands of the Michizagig Anishinaabe, also known today as the Mississaugas of the Credit, the rightful caretakers and title holders of this land. We also recognize the rich pre-contact history and relationships which include the Anishinaabe and the Ongwe Hongwe.
Since European contact, this land continues to be home to Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. As responsible community members, we value the diversity, dignity, and worth of all people.
Colonialism displaced and dispossessed Indigenous peoples of their ancestral land
and continues to deny their basic human rights, dignities, and freedoms.
We are committed to learning true history to reconcile, make reparations, and fulfill our treaty obligations to the original peoples and our collective responsibilities to the lands, water, animals, and each other for future generations.
So I like that thing at the end. How does this land acknowledgement affect you? And maybe that's something to take away. Every time we do a land acknowledgement, not to just ignore it, but to actually reflect. Take a moment to reflect on how it makes you feel and what does it compel you to do as a human being. All right. Number 2 is the approval of the agenda. We do have a couple of changes. We are going to move the motion action log number 13 to up below communications. And we are going to move the adjournment to up below questions asked of them by committee members, because the staff-led consultation is actually a community event that is not going to be recorded. So the adjournment will happen before the staff-led consultation. So with those changes, who would like to move for approval of the agenda? Thank you. Sorry, Susan. Seconded, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. All in favor? Thank you. Any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing no hands raised, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes, which is Special Education Advisory Committee meeting of April 25th, 2023. Does anybody have any comments, questions, or concerns with regards to these minutes? Seeing no hands raised. Jennifer, would you like to move it? And who would like to second? Jazzy? Thank you. All right, I haven't received any written questions from committee members. I do check my emails right before I come in, which is why I saw the regrets from Barb. I haven't been noticed of any motions or petitions. And we have no public here today to ask questions. So we're going to move to reports from officials and staff, which is, we get to hear the superintendent's report. 8.1, Jennifer Newby.
Thank you, Shelley. Good evening, everyone. So the May superintendent report, we continue to receive very positive feedback regarding the tutoring program discussed at our last SEAC meeting. We heard that students are excited to participate in the training and are enthusiastic and smiling during the lessons. As stated in the report shared previously, the statistical data regarding the program is still being gathered and will not be available until the fall. However, the anecdotal information shared by students, teachers, principals, and parents is informing ongoing discussions about approaches to interventions within our schools. May 28th to June 3rd is National Accessibility Week. During this week, we are encouraged to celebrate the leadership contributions of Canadians with disabilities, highlight the work of organizations removing barriers, and reflect on becoming a more inclusive society. Earlier this month, on May 3rd, the Special Education Department held an inclusive job fair. I have attended such events in the past, but for me, this was a fresh new take. The fair happened virtually and featured a number of employers who shared valuable information about different job opportunities, their application process, and specific information about how they accommodate through the interview processes and within their work environment. Presenters included Amazon, HSBC, Ontario Restaurant Hotel Management Association, Tourism Industry Association of Ontario, Food and Beverage Ontario, Community Living Mississauga, and more. Because this inclusive hiring fair is intended to provide information and inspiration to students with various disabilities, it was important to ensure that the voice and perspective of individuals who are differently abled be centered in the event. We were pleased to have our very own Angela Slesser, an itinerant teacher with the Deaf and Hard of Hearing program, share her employment journey and how she has accessed accommodations. After Angela's address, participants went into breakout rooms to hear from employers and industry professionals. I'd like to extend my appreciation to the Cecil Planning Committee for a job well done. As Accessibility Week approaches, we'd like to share an update with regards to Easter Seals and Red Shirt Day. Easter Seals Ontario has recognized the Wednesday of National Accessibility Week as the Red Shirt Day of Action for Accessibility and Inclusion. Everyone is encouraged to wear a red shirt to raise awareness for accessibility and disability inclusion. The Peel District School Board acknowledges the importance of raising awareness and is exploring the possibility of adding Red Shirt Day to their communication plan for the 2023-2024 school year. At this time, staff and students are welcome to wear a red shirt on Wednesday, May 31st, 2023, in support of this important message. As we approach the middle of Mental Health Month, we're pleased to share that Peel schools and programs are engaging in well-being activities that promote a sense of belonging and bring joy to participants through engaging activities. The students in the Deaf and Hard of Hearing program have traditionally gathered in the spring to take part in the annual Deaf and Hard of Hearing Gala. This inclusive event historically featured guest speakers and panelists. This year, the students in the program asked for a different type of event, and as a result, the theme for this year's event was the DHH Forest Gala, a walk in the park. A less structured day of outdoor education and fun at the Jack Smythe Field Center. On Monday, May 15th, there were 47 students from grades 6 to 8 who attended, with secondary students attending today, May 16th. Students engaged in icebreaker activities, scavenger hunts, and enjoyed meals and social time together. We extend our appreciation to the staff leadership within the Deaf Hard of Hearing program for centering student voice and being responsive to their requests for an outdoor experience and an activity-based experience. I'd like to once again welcome our newest committee member, as Shelley did earlier. So we're welcoming Salbona, Afrocentric Circle of Support, as our 12th committee member. That was approved at a previous board meeting earlier this season, and so we're happy to meet Topaz, who's representing the organization this evening. So Salbona, for those of you who are not aware, focuses on supporting students with all disabilities who identify as Black, recognizing the intersectionality of race and disability. So many organizations obviously support students of all races in your organizational context. What makes Salbona different is that in addition to providing that support around students who identify as Black, there's also an emphasis on supporting the parents, the caregivers. And so there's a specific angle there that is going to be of great benefit, I think, in terms of PLCX. So thank you for joining in welcoming our newest member. And that concludes the superintendent report for this evening.
Does anybody have any questions for Jennifer? Yes, Jennifer.
I was wondering, the inclusive job fair sounds fantastic. How do students find out about that? How do they get involved?
So I'm going to turn it over to George Soltanitis, who's part of the planning committee, but there's communication that's sent out to the schools, but I'll let George speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so emails were sent to special ed heads for all secondary schools, and the spec ed heads would have passed it on to the teachers, and we had several students attend. We couldn't capture the amount of students that attended because typically classes would have joined, right? So it would be a teacher, and then they'd have breakout sessions from there. So it was well attended. There were a lot of questions. We did record each breakout session. So it was available for students who didn't have an opportunity possibly to go to all sessions. There were 2 breakout sessions for about an hour at least.
Just a follow-up, so was it mostly classes that attended it? If there was an individual who was, were they able to attend, or did they have to be a part of a class that was attending?
No, so again, I'm not sure of that breakout, but there were links it was a live event, and there were opportunities for students and teachers to post questions in a question and answer thing. But as far as how many or attendance report, I don't have specifics on that.
Thanks.
Anybody else? You have something else?
Just something separate.
Okay, go ahead.
Just wanted to talk about the Easter Seals Red Shirt Day. Thank you for, letting people know about it. If you want any more information about it on the Easter Seals website, there's tons of information. It's not just about wearing a red shirt on that day. It's about pledging to make changes and that kind of thing. So if you want to go and find out a bit more information about it, please do. And when we're talking about it for next year, I think we need to include some of that into the program as well. Thanks.
Anybody else's hand is on? No. And talking about accessibility, just want to remind everybody that before you speak, to turn on your mic and make an effort to actually speak to the mic. Make sure the mic is pointing towards you, because sometimes it's hard for in this acoustic, interesting place for the mics to pick up people's speech patterns. And that helps everybody be here. So thank you for that. We will move on to 8.2, which is the modified day update. And that is, again, is going to be presented by Superintendent Ruby.
Thank you so much, Shelley. So I might normally stand and deliver, so to speak, but because I want to maintain proximity to the mic, I'm just going to stay seated here. So we first heard about Modified Day last year as we took a look at addressing this process within Peel. This is not a new process, it's a legacy process in Peel. And what it's referring to is it's referring to the practice of modifying students' time at school. So it could be time in the school day. So part of that 300 instructional minutes, it could be shortening of the school day, or it could be shortening over the course of a week, for example. So instead of them coming 5 days a week, they're coming 3 days a week, right? So this is a legacy practice. This practice was originally intended for students who were attending therapy, medical, regular routine medical appointments, because you wanted to make a distinction between somebody who is going for IBI therapy 2 days a week, make a distinction between that student and a student who is missing a lot of school, missing 2 or 3 days a week. Like, that's not the same. We know if you're going for treatment, you're going for therapy, we know about that. That's one thing. But if you're just not attending 3 times a week, that could be concerning, and we may want to follow up about that. So the intention of Modified Day was to say, okay, we understand that this child's day is going to be modified. There's no need for, attendance monitoring or following up. We know where they are. They're engaged in a partnership organization or something. They're getting treatment or therapy or something like that. That was the intention for Modified Day. What we noticed over time was there was an expansion of the use of Modified Day. So it started to branch out a little bit and not just be about students getting therapy. There started to creep in other reasons why students' days might be shortened, other reasons why students might not be attending. And so that was becoming a bit of a concern. So we started to take a look at what's the process, how is it determined that a student isn't going to be going to school for the full day? What involvement do parents have? How are we tracking this information? How do we know how often it's happening, where it's happening, and for whom the day is being modified? So we had a lot of questions about it. One of the things that we wanted to be really upfront about was the fact that Modified Day, as we are changing and evolving and making the process more accountable and more transparent, it still is not intended to be used as a tool for excluding students. It's not to be used as a tool for exclusion. So that's why that's up there front and center. And on all of our communication around Modified Day, we continue to make that message very, very clear. We don't want to see students excluded from school. That's not the intention. It's about being accountable for why they may not be attending full days. Next slide, please. So just sharing the guiding principles that special education, social emotional learning works through. So we're working from these lenses, these principles in making our decisions, deciding what we're going to disrupt, what we're going to intervene in, what we're considering, and what's driving the work that we're doing. So everything has to be centered around these 4 principles, and that's how we determine the work that we're doing. This is in alignment with things like the ministry directives, with the board improvement plan. It all aligns with that, but it's also what guides our work in that CECIL department, Special Education, Social Emotional Learning. So when we think about modified day, I have questions. I have questions about, the long-term impacts of students who aren't accessing as much schooling as perhaps they could. That could have a real impact on your pathways and your outcomes later on. So are we being just? Are we seeing modified day being applied to certain groups of students, more so than other groups of students? And is that a sign of some anti-ableism or some bias that's creeping in, misunderstanding of students' school experience and then days being modified? Are we thinking about this from a compassionate lens? Again, there's good reason to modify a student's day, but there's also a reason to try and help the student to develop the skills to attend for a full day. So are we taking a compassionate approach? And then what role does knowledge building play? How are we building knowledge and capacity amongst parents? Because some parents didn't know that this was a thing, right? And that just happened. So again, we're really committed to sharing the knowledge, making sure that parents are aware that this is something that school boards or this particular school board is looking at and has available. How are we building the knowledge and the capacity of principals and school leaders, teachers in schools to support students who may be returning from a modified day? So maybe I didn't go to school very much in grade 1. I was receiving a lot of therapy and assistance, and now I have to try and get back into going to school full days. How are we supporting those transitions? So there needs to be some knowledge building around this. So just sharing the principles. Next slide, please. So I know that the font is a little bit small, but it's basically talking about a process for consideration when the amount of time or number of days the student is attending is being changed. We need to have a process around that to make sure that we are being thoughtful and intentional as to why this is happening, and to make sure that there's accountability, because we do, as a system, want to be accountable to parents and to our students, so wider community as well. We also want to be mindful of discriminatory barriers that might be influencing who's on a modified day and to what degree and at what point they return to full-time learning. So we have to be just reflective and aware of our biases. Next slide, please. So these are the guiding principles that was informing the work around modified day when we first got started. So leadership and capacity building, that connects to that area of knowledge that I was talking about before. So we ask these questions. When you're going to modify a day, ask the question, who is the student? When we say who, we mean how old is this child that we're modifying the day for? Do they have any kind of identification? What is their identity in terms of their social location within the system? Like really, who is the student, right? And how might they be impacted by a modified day? Thinking about those things, how does your social location, the person who's contemplating this, how does that influence the decision or the consideration for a modified day, right? So just bringing ourselves, our whole selves, into the conversation and thinking about the choices that we're making, especially when they can have long-term impacts on students, right? And then we're asking questions like, what professional learning and training did you and your staff engage in to support the student on this journey? And if you haven't yet, and sometimes it's an ongoing piece, you can have a lot of turnover on a staff, you have to start over again with some training that you just did 2 years ago. So it's an ongoing process in terms of professional learning. It can't ever be one and done. So we're asking these questions. So it's not asking the question in any kind of way to say we're putting anybody on the spot. It's questions for reflection, questions for you to think about as a leader or as a superintendent as well. Next slide, please. So under accountability, I think one of the key questions is one of the first questions we're asking is what's the plan for the increase in the student's day? So it's modified now, and again, there may be very good reason for that. Parents may have requested that, and that's okay. What's the plan for the return to the full day? How will we support the student as they return to full-time studies, right? So what are we doing in terms of goal setting? What resources are we accessing within the community? So again, questions for reflection and process around accountability, because we do need these questions to be considered. And in some cases, we're asking for the information on a modified day request form. Next slide, please. We're also thinking about student learning and well-being. We know that there are some impacts to not attending school regularly, socially, academically. So what are we doing to think about that? How are we keeping that in mind? We're thinking about the structural and environmental, social, cultural contributing factors when we're thinking about modified day as well. I know it's a lot of text on the screen, but again, it's just to show that these are the questions that we want people to think about and the issues that we want people to consider when you're thinking about reducing the amount of time a student's attending school, whether it's, again, daily reduction or weekly reduction. Next slide, please. And then we're thinking about the relationships. One of the things that we really needed to add to this process around modified day was signed parent consent. Modified day should be happening with a parent's 100% agreement. And that, from what I heard from parents, because we did some parent consultation, I heard that wasn't necessarily happening as consistently, okay? It wasn't necessarily happening as consistently as we would want. So what we're trying to say is, listen, if a student is not going to be attending full day, the parents, A, should be aware and B, should be in agreement. Because otherwise, now you're saying you can't come to school, then that's something else. But again, we're getting into another area, and that's not what the modified day was intended to be. So we ask now for a signed form to say this has been discussed. It was discussed with the parent on this date. The parent is in agreement, and they sign off for that. So again, I just want to acknowledge all of the work of the staff and the department, and also the integrity of the director's office for being willing to engage in this work and be reflective and say, hey, we do need to adjust this process. Because we are hearing from parents that either they didn't know or they didn't know that they had a say. They didn't know that they could say, no, my child needs to go every day for the full day, and this is not something I consent to. So they didn't necessarily know that. So I really appreciate this as a courageous act on the part of the Peel District School Board to disrupt a practice that could have been very oppressive for a number of students, and that's how it was received by some. Next slide, please. So what I'm sharing with you today, so again, this has been, the process was revised spring of last year. We digitized the process. So again, it used to be just a paper form, but because we wanted to track it, because we wanted the accountability, it's now a digital process. So you click on a site, you go in, you fill out the form digitally so that we can capture data. So we've just been piloting this new form of the modified day this year. So it launched in the fall. It was, again, used last spring, but it was very hiccupy and we had a lot of kinks to work out. So it was really used in earnest. So, and this, I think this came up as a question too from a committee member and was on the action motion log as well, that we were going to bring forward just a little bit of data and a little bit of information about what we're learning and some of the questions that we have. So what we're saying is just sort of timing is some of the totals. This is from September to now. Obviously, again, it's not counting last year. One of the questions we're asking is what's the most common reason for modified day? We wanted that question to sort of share with you and some notable trends. Next slide, please. Okay, so I am going to have to speak to this because it's small. So as we're taking a look, you'll see that 101, which is the yellow, which is almost half the pie chart, that is
professional services. So those are the students who are accessing services like ABA, IBI therapy, mental health support, physiotherapy, going out for physiotherapy appointments. That's that big yellow group. So again, that's the group that I was saying that was the intention of Modified Day in the first place. It was to capture those students. But then we have other reasons for Modified Day. So we take a look at what those trends are showing. In that medical there, you have complex medical needs, and it says absence of complex medical needs. That's just, that part shouldn't be there, absence of complex medical needs. It's just complex medical needs. That is included in a large portion. The other portion is transition planning. So planning for entry, that's a form that everybody has when you're coming from external to Peel or you're entering into kindergarten, you have planning for entry. So there could be a gradual increase, for example. So you starting, I'm coming for an hour a day for the first little while, and then I'm coming for 2 hours and I'm building up. That would be an example of a transition where your day is modified shortly and you're building up to your time. So transitions is time, and then you have other. And so what we are, there's a base, and that's sort of what we're thinking about, right? So we are thinking about what that other category involves. There's a description on the form that explains what is happening in that student's life and circumstance, why there may be a request for a modified day. So we couldn't capture every possible area. We took the 3 areas that were biggest, which was complex medical, out for therapy, or transitions. Those are the big 3, so we captured those specifically. But we did need another category for circumstances that wouldn't fall into those categories. So you can have more conversation on what that looks like, because that is a larger slice than perhaps you would expect, right? If it's not one of those other reasons. Next slide, please. And finally, just a bit of a breakdown by grade. If you're curious as to where most of the modified day happens, at 57 is kindergarten. That big high one in the middle. That's where the vast majority of your modified day happens, trails off when you start looking into secondary school. And that's typically, when we think about early years and early intervention, that's the time when students get therapy. There are some programs that are specifically dedicated to early years, so you're going to expect students to be out and participating in therapy at that time. So it's not surprising that kindergarten is the time at which a lot of students are having a modified day. There are some questions sometimes that parents have about readiness. They feel that their child isn't ready for a full day, so they may make modifications for those reasons. So that's the area. And then, as I said, it tends to kind of fluctuate and trail off a little bit beyond that. By the time we get to grade 7, grade 8, it's trailing a little bit. Next slide, please. The other area that I just wanted to share a bit of data on, and this is the last data point that we have, is who's initiating the modified day. And by initiating, we're saying who's asking for this child's day to be modified. So we could have the school making the request, making the recommendation, or we could have it be a parent requested or recommended modified day. And so this is certainly in line with what I hope to see, that most modified day requests are initiated by the parent, because there's a reason that the parent feels that there needs to be perhaps a modification in the school day. Only in a small number of instances is the school asking for that modified day. And again, it's just a request that school's making because the parent has to agree and sign off, right? But it just means that the school initiated it, is making that suggestion and that recommendation. And I thought that's a very important piece for us to know as well, is who's asking for it, who's initiating it. Next slide, please. And so we're thinking about our next steps, both as a system and as a department. The two are inextricably linked. So we're thinking about what we're going to do with some of this data. There's more data than obviously that I've shared. I've shared some of the key trends. So what are we going to do with the data? How is it going to inform and change practice within the board, within the system? What feedback do we have yet to get from parents and community with regards to
how they're feeling about modified day and how it's working for them. There's a lot of departments also involved in modified day that I want to also acknowledge, right? This impacts other departments, other areas. It impacts curriculum. It impacts students' ability to participate, for example, in assessments. If they're not there time and time again when assessments are happening, it impacts their experience in terms of engaging with the curriculum. We've talked about that. And certainly there's some challenges around transportation too, right? Depending on what program you're in, how you're getting back and forth to school or getting back and forth to your appointments. These are all things that can be factors that are affecting the students' experience of school. So we're thinking about these things, we're taking a look at the data, and we're moving forward to continuously improve. I know that in the weeks to come, we're connecting with our senior team. So AD De Silva was good enough to find a little bit of time on our senior team agenda to be able to talk with superintendents about this, because one of the things that I also really appreciate about leadership in Peel is that superintendents have taken an active role in modified day, in taking a look at when a student's day is modified. So in terms of stages of approval, it's applied for by the school, it goes to the family of school superintendent for approval, and then it comes to me for approval as well. And typically I'm approving them unless there's something really untoward or concerning that I really don't understand, then I'll reach back to the superintendent and ask for some clarification, and that's always a helpful conversation. But again, this is just fantastic. It shows the commitment of the field superintendents in Peel that they've taken this on and taken this up. And when I take a look at the forms, when they come to me, I can see the comments between the superintendent and the principal. It's been great conversation. Very excellent. Like the superintendent encouraging the principal, thanks so much for supporting this child, for looking into this. Or, you know, hey, let's talk about this a little bit more. I'm not sure that we're, you know, going to start that right now. So excellent conversations happening between superintendents and principals. So just very, very grateful for the colleagues and for the director's office in supporting students and disrupting and changing this practice for what I hope is the better. So that concludes this update with regards to modified day, and I'm happy to take any questions that there might be.
I saw Jesse's hand go up, and then we'll move around the table.
Thank you, Superintendent Murphy, for that, because as a parent, that's something top of mind. Like my son has kidney failure, and then obviously will be away from school for a little bit. And I didn't even know that there was a modified day until I think the last meeting that we were in. My first question to you is the curriculum adjusted for modified day, or the expectation is that the child then will catch up with the curriculum, or is it like, I know there's an IEP in the back, so it just depends on the individual parent and child. Okay. I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, no, it has to be determined individually. So again, if a student has an individual education plan, that is one way of adjusting the goals that you're setting. It may be modified, it may not. It depends on the student's individual education plan, one. Two, it also depends on the duration of the modified day. To your point, it may be for 4 weeks and then it's over. So the rest of the year is unaffected, right? So you really have to think about the amount of time. There's so many different factors, so it has to be on a case-by-case basis that we decide that.
Thank you. My next question, sorry everyone, I have like a ton of questions. My next question is, how do you get students involved socially? So I know you had a bunch of stuff about social interaction and the emotional health of the student and them being away from the school. How do you, what are some ideas that, because this is a legacy program and you are revisiting it, how does the school right now get the students involved or not feeling so excluded socially from that environment?
Thank you so much for that question. I think that it's first and foremost, raising the awareness of the importance of that and asking those questions. So you remember that slide about the well-being and that kind of thing? So if we're being mindful of that, we're being caring and compassionate, we're saying, is this modified day limiting the student's opportunity to participate in other school events? You may be on a modified day schedule, but you can still participate in a track and field meet if that's something that's going on. You can still participate in other school activities. It would really depend on, again, the special circumstances. Some modified days situations are more flexible than others, where we can switch from that Thursday to now I'll go on Wednesday and I can be at school for that particular celebration or something that's happening, right? So I think just asking the question and being mindful of it will put people in a frame of mind to say, all right, how are we providing opportunities for students to really make the best of the time that they are attending, and make sure that they maintain and create those social connections that we think are very valuable for students over time. So I think awareness is sort of our first step, because again, it's going to look different for every student. And also there's a developmental piece to that, right? Different for a student in grade 1 versus a student in grade 6, right? In terms of the implications of their social connections.
And my last question is, when a student is, a parent or student is, identified as a need, that they have a specific need, that process can be lengthy and emotional and hard on the administration of the school and on the parent, right? But when it comes to modified, I can only imagine all of the different components that you have to consider, and one being socially. Is there like an itinerant or somebody that will then help support the administration of the schools, that all of those components are being looked into or thought through, well thought out? Like, I know you said that there's like a digital copy or guiding principle, but is there like support that's going to be handed to the parent and to the principal so that they have that, all of those components?
That's a great question. Thank you so much. I think that what we're trying to emphasize here is the meeting. There should be a student review meeting, conversation that happens before a student's day is modified, if it's for any other reason than the therapy reasons. Usually with the therapy reasons, we've got some documentation from the agency or from medical professionals, so we know what the circumstances are there. But in other instances, there should be an opportunity to sit around a table and talk about what we're doing, why, how this might impact the student. So that's why on the form it asks the date that you had a meeting with parents. So we don't want it to be driven by, I looked at the form, I did check mark, check mark, check mark, and now I'm going to do this. We really want to encourage the conversation. So that's why we're asking for a meeting. So we have been promoting the student review process. It's been, again, also revised. And we really wanted people to exercise that, to use that, because we realize the fundamental benefit of people engaging in meaningful, thoughtful conversation. So we don't want it to be driven by what's on a form or what's in a booklet. We want people to consider this through conversation about the student.
Topaz, you're next. Oh, I thought you would put your hand up.
I think she had hers.
Carol, we're moving around the horseshoe right now. Carol?
Thank you. I just wanted to know how long that process is from the moment that someone says they want to have it modified to when you actually sign off on that plan, usually. I know there's like differences in terms of, discussions and stuff like that, but on an average, what is that turnaround time?
That one is a good question. I can take a look and see if we can gather some data around that.
Okay.
So I know I try and set a time to go through modified day forms, so whether it's a particular day of the week where I sit down and I do my modified day forms. My approval of it doesn't necessarily preclude it from starting. Okay. So if they had a start date of a week from now or something like that, it's not like it's being held up because I didn't approve it. If that was the case, they'd reach out to me, the superintendent or whatever, would reach out to me and say, is there any issues with that? But it doesn't delay that process. What it does though is it alerts to any, again, questionable situation where I'm saying, okay, I don't see a signed form here. Was there a conversation with the parents? Can you please just attach the signed form? So we are trying to get the accountability piece. But again, I don't have the data in terms of the length of time. Maybe that's something that's available now, I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you. And my other question is regarding the approvals. Are we tracking any data where parents have said no to it? And have we tracking any data where the school has said no, or the board has said no?
Fascinating. We would have data where I've said no, because it's an electronic process, so I'm pressing approve or not approved, right? So I'd have data where I've said no, and it could be, I'm gonna say no again if it's come to me, and this is just a common example, and there hasn't been a parent's signature form, and it could be a technical issue, like, please understand, right? I wouldn't know that though, right? They thought they attached it. It comes to me, I don't see the parent form signed, so I reject it, and I say, please resubmit with the parent form signed. So we'd have information about which ones I've rejected. If I've rejected it for any other reason, I write down the reason. If there's a section for comments, I write that down. That data we would have. If it's superintendent rejection, that data we would have. If there was a discussion at school level and they decided not to submit the form, that we would not have, because it didn't go into the system, right? They had a discussion, or maybe the parent said, I prefer not to do that right now. And so then I wouldn't have that information because they never did the form. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Is there a possibility of maybe adding that into the data somehow or another? Just so that sometimes it may not be required now, but maybe in the future sort of thing. So you sort of see with the timeline change switch, sort of like, oh, we went through 2 years of schooling. Yeah, we really need to have the modified sort of thing. And the parents agreeing to that now because they see that trend happening with their child. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I think that, again, the mechanism for that would be the student review meeting, because there's notes associated, there's tracking associated with the student review meeting. So if this was raised as a student review meeting, where it's like, should we consider a modified day to help with this transition back when they're going off for this therapy or they're going off for something, that would be the place, I think, that we could track that information. I think that would make sense to track it there.
Okay, it'd be interesting to see how we could like that,
but it can definitely take that suggestion forward as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Jeff, did you have a question?
Okay, I noticed the pie chart. I can't remember. Anyway, it was a list of the different grades of the the incidence of modified days, and I noticed that from kindergarten it had a downward trend, and then at grade 12 it was up. Do we know why? Yeah, like it's like kindergarten's at 57, and
I think that's grade.
It says
S4. I'm just trying to take a look at the.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 kindergarten.
Sorry, those are the kindergarten. I think it's 7. I can't see the color clearly, so I don't know if that 31. You're talking about the 31, right?
31 is S4.
Is it? I think it's.
It's S4.
Is it S4 or is it 7?
It's S4.
S4.
S4 is 31.
Okay, this is data that's fresh off of the, right,
Okay.
that I'm bringing forward because it was put together by our research team. So our research department, I said, can you please illustrate the trends? The analysis is underway right now.
Okay.
So remember I said, for example, on the pie chart where there was that section that was other, and it was a little bit big, like you would think that that'd be a sliver, right? You'd think that that'd be just a little section of, there's some other ones that don't fall into this, but it's bigger than, I would have guessed. We have analysis to do. So again, just sharing this is very high level, very preliminary, but have not had a chance to dig into. I offered a theory as to why I think there's a lot more in kindergarten, and that's because those are early years, early intervention years. So I offered a theory as to why you might see that big kindergarten number. But in terms of really digging in, and we'd have to go back, look at the modified day forms themselves and look at the reasons. Look at because there's a whole section where the school, in consultation with the parents, have written essentially the story of this child's circumstance and why this modified day is happening. The graph doesn't tell you that, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying, like the analysis of the data, we have the preliminary data to say, hey, what are we seeing or what do we need to dig into? But we haven't gotten to the analysis stage yet.
Okay, great, cool. I'm kind of excited to see I love to understand things, and the whole team's doing a great job with this. Okay, thanks.
Althea? Oh, you have, sorry.
you're going around the table, so I.
Turns out it's.
I didn't put back.
Sorry, Susan, I didn't
No,
know
it's
you were
okay, it's okay. So all the questions that I had have been answered. My only one question is, when you said it was legacy practice, when was it being practiced before in the board or? So is that?
Associate Director Silva, I used to bust it talking during meetings. So there was a question about the legacy nature, and again, I've only been in Peel for 2 years. AD De Silva's been for longer. So I understand that modified day form. Again, it was already here when I arrived. I don't know if you have any sense of, it was around when you were a principal, like I don't know.
Sure, I can certainly speak to that. And very similarly, through you, Chair, very similarly, we wanted to essentially capture why students were not attending school. So we developed this modified day. I was a young principal then, perhaps 15 years ago. But really it was an opportunity to capture and put it on do some accountability around why students were not attending for a variety of different reasons. In the past, to be honest, there was always just this informal conversation with a parent, hey, you might want to keep your child home so I can get a TA or an EA in place to do that. And it was never captured anywhere. So I think this is kind of trying to formalize the process in a way. And then with the new, what Jennifer is trying to do is even tighten it even further as, I think things were a little lackadaisical around, sharing that information with the superintendents of schools. But also understanding that potentially we didn't want any of the administrators or teachers or vice versa taking advantage of a situation where a student should be attending, but out of convenience, it would be preferred that they stay home until the school gets all their ducks in a row in order for that transition to happen in school. So I think we're trying to tighten that up, and in fact, what is happening and what we're hoping that happens is further discussion and consultation happens between the principal and the families, a really thorough conversation, and that conversation carries forward with the principal and superintendent, because now the superintendent is aware. Probably 8-9 years ago when I was a superintendent in the field, I didn't know how many modified day, if you will, or how many students were not attending for a variety of reasons. And typically they would reside students who have special needs. And so this has given us an opportunity to kind of put some accountability onto the process and ensure that no one is being taken advantage of and schools are accessing school when they need to. Happy to take any further questions.
Thank you, Associate Director, and thank you. I think this is a great initiative. Thank you, Chair.
Fausia, your turn now. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm just talking about those kids. There is one kind of transition that happens from ABA therapies to schools. The other transition is when let's say a student has a full day in one school, had some problems, the school has to be changed. The kid was having full day also, but the new school says we'll start with 1 hour a day. And this is a fairly common practice. And then they slowly increase the day, and at times it takes a very long time for the student to get full day. And is there a data around this kind of transitions? And also parents in that case don't have a lot of say. Already there was a problem in the previous school. A change takes place, and then the new school, it becomes kind of like a criteria. How well is the student doing? Oh, these 2 weeks went well, so we are increasing the time again. So is there any data around that? And anything that can be done for those children and families?
Thanks so much for the question, and I apologize for not saying through you, Chair. I just feel like it's a better way of, more natural way of communicating when you just speak directly, so no disrespect intended there. I'm throwing back to what Associate Director De Silva was just speaking about, right, in terms of past practice and that we're moving in a direction to change. The idea that this is happening sort of informally, that somebody's being told, well, we're going to start with an hour a day and we'll see how it goes, right? There has to be a plan for the student to come to school full time, and it shouldn't take 8 months, right? Ideally, it shouldn't be something that's dragged out. Like you have to say, this is our goal time, this is our goal day. We're hoping students back, by May 15th. We're hoping students back by whatever. You have to have a date. So this idea that the modified day is just going to continue indefinitely, especially if it's not something that the parents have agreed to, that would be concerning, right? The other piece here is the situation that you're describing doesn't sound like there's parent consent there. So again, that's another piece, because I don't know how you justify, even though there's a move and even though there's a transition. I mean, again, I'm a principal of school, Paul is principal of the school, we were all principals in school years. If students changing schools, they're just changing schools. If I'm full-time this school to full-time that school, it doesn't automatically mean you're reducing the time, okay? That should be something that you're discussing in consultation with the parents. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to raise awareness to say there should be a conversation. And we're not expecting all of the parents in the system to know about modified day. The onus there is on school principals. That's why we're saying school principals, your responsibility to have a conversation with the family if you're feeling like it might be a good idea to be gradual with this transition. It's because we know we can't necessarily get that message out to parents in a consistent way, especially if they're coming from outside Peel, they wouldn't know that, right? So we're saying it's the school's responsibility. So I think going forward, we're trying to reduce the incidence of that very situation that you are describing, where there's sort of an informal, exactly like what AD De Silva just described, where it's just sort of like, oh, we'll just be gradual and I don't think they're going to come every day. That's problematic. And that's why I insist on the parent signature. If there's no parent signature, we loop back to the superintendent, and sometimes there's a reason, right? They need more time to find a translator, to have a fulsome conversation. There's a whole host of reasons, right? But it can't be that it's just the school's decision to not allow a student to come certain days of the week, or to not allow a student. Other situations are, we have processes for those, and that's why we're saying modified day is not to be used as a tool for excluding students. That was never the intention, and it still isn't now. So we are trying to get more accountable with that. Thank you for that example.
Yeah, thank you. I think this work is really needed. I know many families, including my own family, are going through this. And I guess other than modified days, maybe sometime a similar work will need to be done about calls from school to pick the child up. So that might be the next step, but I'm very glad the direction you are going into, because the parents who I informed about, I think this consent thing started in September. Yeah, I told some parents, and this really helped them. They ended up having a full day restored. So it's a great move.
We're going to go to Adam. Yes, Audrey.
Thank you. I just had a quick question. What would be some of the reasons behind initiating a modified day by the school or by the principal?
I had a feeling that question. I thought about that question. So probably the most common reason for initiating, or for the school requesting, I didn't want to say initiating, would be to provide training to staff. So there are sometimes, this is your first time receiving a student with a certain constellation of needs, complex medical needs or something like that, and you need to do some specialized training with the staff. That would be an example of the school saying, can we please have a conversation about modification of the schedule for 3 days or something. I'm going to have this person from public health come in and do a presentation. I'm going to have these people coming. We're going to do some training. That to me would be an example of a reason why a school might say, we're not prepared. right? And so they may ask for it in that instance. It's not to say that it can't happen with the student there, but sometimes, again, it's just helpful, and sometimes parents say they appreciate it. They're like, thank you for taking this seriously, for taking the time to get the staff trained. Everybody's gonna be trained in this, for example, and stuff like that. So sometimes that would be an example of a reason that school might request.
Okay, thank you. And then what would be, what impact would that be to the student support system? So like if they're on a modified day program where they're only coming in maybe say 2 or 3 days a week or half days every day, does that impact the support that they get? So the EA or the TA support that they have?
That's a good question. It should not affect that. It really, again, it would depend on the extent, the duration of that modified day, right? So it would depend on that. So if, again, a short time, a couple of days or something, or maybe 2 hours a day that they're away from school would not likely affect that support, but it really depends on the situation. But I would say not generally. It's not something that we're factoring in.
Okay, thank you.
Jennifer?
Thank you. Just a couple of questions that came up out of data. I understand we haven't had a chance to look at it, but something maybe a few things to look at. When it came to the grades, we might want to look at that with the number of students, because kindergarten is actually 2 grades, right? So that would explain why it would be double kind of thing. So we might want to look at that on a basis of the number of students to really understand what's going on there. I'd really like to understand, you have the data about what was initiated by parents and by school, or how many. I'd like to understand that with respect to the type of reasons. So for instance, I would imagine 101 therapies were probably parents. So then you're down to sort of a 96 to 43, and how does that fall in with respect to other and transition planning and that kind of thing. I'd also like to understand how many hours and how quickly these things are being resolved. So a graph of like, of those 236 students, 100 of them were only out for 3 days because of whatever reason. So things like that, like how much is this impacting these, or are they all still out, right? So that's pretty critical. And I'd like to understand how we're identifying whether it was a parent or a school initiated. I think it would be nice when the parent signs, if there was a box there that could say, was this school initiated or parent initiated, as opposed to the school ticking off whether it was school or parent initiated. Because sometimes that can get a little gray. I would say it's some of the conversations that I've heard happening. Yeah, I guess in the gathering the parent experience from this, is there a plan to kind of understand how parents are feeling about this new process? Are they feeling empowered and that they could say no, or how's it actually working for them? And then to what you're saying, Fuzzy, is getting this word out to parents, because as much as we trust our principals and things like that, we all have had stories and experiences where parents don't know about these options and they aren't asked to sign, and things are agreed to and happen under the table. So how do we ensure that people are aware that this system exists, so they're not, that this stuff still isn't happening under the table? Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate those suggestions. Take note of that.
Did anybody else have any more questions? Yes, Jazzy.
Not a question, but a comment, because we're in a world of digital media and social media and all this stuff. If a student has to be on a modified schedule because they need therapy, has there been any thought put into if, like in the classrooms or in the school, they can plug in virtually for those, I don't know, 2 hours a week so that they feel included? Just a comment.
Okay. Thank you, Jess. All right, so we've had 2 reports from Jennifer, and we're going to receive both. Fauzi, would you like to? Something else to add?
No, I was.
Okay, so yeah, so Fauzi is moving for receipt, and Jeffrey's okay. Thank you, Fauzi. All right. We have communications. So we're going to move to the motion action law 13.1. And Jennifer, would you like to speak to this?
So we have our one item remaining at this time on the action motion log, and that was raised by Jennifer Knight. So we're looking for follow-up potentially in June with regards to this. So recognizing when it went on, it's there still. It needs to be a very fulsome report. Like it can't be a kind of update, right? It's not an update type of piece. So if a report can be tabled for June, we'll look to do that. Otherwise, we would take a look at tabling something in the fall because it is very in-depth. And the other thing to recognize too is not that this isn't important, but we're focusing on our right to read reports, there was a lot happening this year. So at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we give all of the time, and I'm thinking about all the reports that have come to CIAC already this year. We have to make sure that we give this enough time. So I recognize it went on much earlier in the year, November. It's still on there now, but it's going to have to be a really fulsome report. So apologies for the delay in putting this together. Oh, and then the other thing too is we're going to have our first, I think it's our first, so correct me, those of you who are longtime CIAC people actually, I was hearing before that there used to be this consultation process that we're doing tonight that used to be a regular part of CIAC.
Yeah, we're having a breakout rooms, yes.
Right, so that used to be a regular part. So I feel as though that this is also, should be part of this approach. So depending on how it goes this evening and the feedback from CIAC, you can also let us know whether that should be part of what informs our next steps in taking a look at the ministry work around this. So I just want to share that, please.
Yes, Jennifer?
Yeah, just if we can't get to this year, is it possible to have this information sent out board-wide as information? Because I've run into several superintendents, principals that don't even know this exists. And there's a lot of great ideas to help administrators, superintendents, that kind of thing. Has it ever been sent out? I mean, it was last February, maybe you don't know, when it first went 2 years ago. There's a lot of great ideas in there if you're trying to make something more accessible. There's some really great thoughts and things. So it would be nice if people on the board were aware that it existed.
Thanks for that suggestion. I'll take that forward because it would be a system-wide communication. So that would go to AD Silva, but we can certainly take a look at that. And I agree with you, maybe fall is a better time. This is not a time when people would maybe sit down and be able to read through this. But at the start of the year, they can engage in conversations with their parent council. So that would be something that we can definitely maybe look at for next year.
Great suggestion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that, encourage the communication rate in the beginning. So would you like to move for receipt of the action motion? Thank you, Jennifer. All right. Do we have to have that seconded?
Yeah.
Seconded, Sue. Thank you, Susan. I've got another Susan. Okay, reports from representatives on councils and associations or questions asked by committee members. I'd like to start with the announcement that our next meeting, we're encouraging everybody to come because there will be nibbles and sweets. We're having a little bit of a party because we may be saying goodbye to some people, but I've been told we might be saying goodbye to some retiring people. So we're going to have some nibbles and sweets at the beginning of the meeting, and probably at the end, they'll still be there at the end of the meeting. Yeah, we encourage you to come out to next meeting. It's going to be a fun one. Does anybody else have any questions or reports? Anne, go ahead.
So I'm wondering when the special education plan is going to come to CIAC. Normally by this time we've been through it because it has to go into the government soon, right?
has to go in, thank you so much for raising that, it does have to go in over the summer, it's usually submitted over the summer, and SEAC should be looking at it. That is the only agenda item for the June SEAC agenda. That's the only item that I had coming forward, because it does have to come to SEAC before the end of the year. And so there have been meetings about the special education plan, because there are revisions taking place to criteria for entry into certain programs. So it's not just a case of just take last year's plan, change the date and bring it forward. This has been a very thoughtful, very engaging process. So what are the criteria for entering into an ASD identification and a program? What are the criteria for our learning disabilities identification? We are re-examining the criteria for many of the programs, and that's what's taking an extra long time. You remember the presentation that coordinating principal Sultanitis did last SEAC meeting, when we said we no longer require a psych assessment for consideration for addictive placement, for example, and for some other areas as well. So those types of things now need to be captured in the special education plan. You know, put out the plan again with the same old criteria when we're in the midst of changing some of these requirements. So there has to be some updates, some review. So it's been a very lengthy process, but again, that's what's on the agenda for June. Thank you for raising that.
One more thing. Is it possible to get an organizational chart for the department? I think that would be really helpful.
Honestly, okay, so I was speaking with Associate Director De Silva today, and again, I'm still back and forth about the accuracy of the chart that I'm going to send. Because between last meeting and this meeting, there's been changes, right? And I had said that initially, I said, I feel like the minute it goes out, it's out of date. The minute you have it in your hand, it's out of date. But there can be a sort of, I think, overall one that doesn't really get into the names specifically, or doesn't really get into too much detail, so that it can be shared with you. So that is on the agenda, that, and I think the parent concern process was the other document that was requested. So we're going to put it all together in a package and sort of share it with you, I think, after this meeting, or, well, in advance of the June meeting. That's the plan. Yeah. Yeah, please, AD De Silva.
Yeah, through you, Chair. And I'm just curious as, and not to dismiss the request, I think it's a great request. I'm just curious as to why you're requesting the org chart. Is there a deficiency around accessing people or understanding what roles people have? I'm curious as to the request.
Well, it's really helpful to know who all the people are in the special ed department. I mean, the coordination principals, the people who deal with autism, the people who deal with developmental disability, for instance, or, learning disabilities. It would be really helpful. We've always had it in the past. And I just find that I no longer know who these people are.
And so you're, through your chair, looking at going as deeply as who the certs are, who the coordinators and so on, that deep down into the organizational chart.
Yeah, because what happens is we as parent reps often get upset parents approaching us, and we're having to tell them, well, this is, have you talked to so-and-so? Have you talked, and oh yes, I talked to this, I didn't get what I wanted. Okay, well, did you go to the next person up? Oh yeah, and then we're looking at the board office, which is continually changing, people coming and going, and we don't know who to send them to next, and I think that's why we're asking, just so that we know some names, so that when a parent comes to us with a concern, and it's like, okay, well, you've gone up the ladder this far, okay, now we know where to go after.
And the reason I ask is because oftentimes what I wouldn't like to see is perhaps folks being jumped over and then not accessing the folks initially who should be accessed. For example, currently we have our director, Rashmi Stewart, who's getting inundated with personal requests, and those folks, those community members haven't started where the issue resides, potentially with the teacher, with the principal, and so on. So I'm just cognizant of making sure that process maintains its integrity, so that folks understand evolution of this situation.
And maybe that's something that we can put in, especially since we have a new member. We have some new members that we put in that hierarchy. Well, when a parent comes to you, who should they be talking to first?
That's great.
Who should they be asking the questions of first? Because, yeah, we do have even our, Jazz is new, fairly new, and Topaz is new, and we have a new alternate. Like, we do have some new people, so it'd be nice to have that information. Like, some of us who have been here for a long time will be, we get that parent and say, I know a lot of us will say, well, did you talk to the principal? Did you have a conversation with the teacher, with the principal? What was said during these meetings?
Yeah, so through you, Chair, I think if we pair the two documents together, then the parent communication protocol along with an organizational chart, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and the other thing I was thinking too was placing it within the special education plan, because within the special education plan there are job and role descriptions as well. So I mean, again, I got a parent call today. Again, I welcome parent calls, no problem, no issues. But again, I have to say I cannot answer your question. I cannot answer that question, right? So you're asking, is there space in that program? You know what I mean? That is somebody who's on, coordinating Principal Jacket's team and who have the charts. So I still had to tell the parent, you're going to have to wait for me to get in touch with this person, who's going to get in touch with the other person, who's going to give you the answer. I would never have that answer, right? So if we have that in either as AD De Silva suggested, it's going along with the parent protocol, or if it's not a concern, if you really do want to talk to somebody in the special education department, make sure you're talking to the right person, because you're calling Jennifer Purdue, she can't tell you this, and she can't tell you that. Here's what she can tell you. So we have those sort of responsibilities and job description type of things in the spec ed plan as well. So that can help her there as well.
Yes, Jazz?
Yeah, I was just gonna add, because I've also had parents,
Oh, your microphone.
sorry, I've also had parents ask me the same thing, and I know that a couple of SEAC meetings prior to this one, we had a meeting where someone presented the resolution process. And so then I tried to follow it and say, hey, engage the teacher, engage the principal, and then if you can't come to it, only then do you go to the superintendent, but try to have a powwow yourself. But the challenge with that, with the website, with the community that we live in, is not everyone knows how to navigate the website. So you give them the information, and then the job description gets difficult. Like you guys have lengthy job descriptions, and I'm sending them your way. But I'm like, what does that mean to a parent that has an XYZ concern? And is it AD De Silva, or is it Superintendent Newby? I don't know who to direct it to. But the other challenge is the email addresses are not on the website, and there's just an extension, and I'm hesitant for them to direct them, for me to direct them to the extension to say, start calling Mr. De Silva because he's going to help you. Just start ringing his phone, right? But there's no email address there either. But I think if there was a North Office email address, or I don't know, some way where they can then have an outlet and some kind of time commitment response, and that would also help, right? Instead of directly sending them to a phone number and a person to call. I don't know, my own personal experience.
Jennifer's talking about this.
I don't mean to, sorry, I know I didn't have my mic on. I wasn't trying to have a private conversation here.
Which may or may not be running
Yeah,
again.
we did double check. There's a SEAC email as well, right? Which would come to Shelley and Dainty, my admin assistant. So maybe we need to, remember we're saying we're updating the SEAC brochure now that we have the names to put in for the vacancies and everything. So the SEAC brochure will also contain some contact information. So either we're going to put the SEAC email in there to say if you have any questions, please email us at seac.on.c. What do we do for Peel? .plsb.com, something like that, right? So we'll put that in there as well. But I'm pretty sure the SEAC email is up and running. And if it doesn't go to
I think DP has mentioned that she's received a few things, but
She's got access, I confirm that, so we do have access.
I don't know what the password is.
Okay, so we'll follow up around that, because that's basically, because really, to your point, I don't think what we want to do is have, there's an email for AD De Silva, here's an email for superintendent, here's a whole bunch of people, if you're not sure, just send your email to one address and we'll try and redirect you from there. Does that make sense?
But you
Do
can
one
always,
email.
you can always email me directly.
That too.
Got it.
Thank you for that suggestion.
And I have responded to a variety of parents and CN representatives. Yes, Jennifer?
So I think to me, what this is showing us is parents don't have any idea who to contact.
Yeah,
So
they
go to
don't,
the
yeah,
top,
they're
right?
the.
So it's great that we're all gonna know, but how do we make sure parents even know to get to us, right? Or who to go to next? I think that's the real key here, is that if they're going right to the top, is because they don't know what to do next. And and sending it to an email address that's to SEAC, whatever, that may or may not get addressed. Some of these issues are urgent and serious, and they need to know who to go to next. So I think we have some work to do around communication and letting our parents know how to go up the ladder and that kind of thing. I think that the document that you're talking about will help that a lot. But I do agree, all of the titles have changed. I'm not even clear who everyone is, what their job used to be and what it is now, and trying to line them up, I find challenging. So I think we have a bit of work to do to help the parents get what they need.
And
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that we give the organisation chart to everybody, I mean to parents, it's just for our benefit.
it's for our benefit.
Yeah, so that we know, if we have to try and get in touch with somebody, we know who to go to, and then we can pass the information on to the parent. But I'm not suggesting that the parents are given, everybody's given an organisation chart, that's not what I'm suggesting.
I certainly got that, Anne. It's for our use and not just generally give out to parents.
Sure.
Yes, Jennifer?
But parents should be able to figure out where to go next,
They should.
right? So there's something that the parents need to have access to online and be able to email someone as opposed to getting, so I found that myself, you want to get a hold of someone and send them, or you want to copy someone and email addresses are not readily available, which is odd.
Yeah, sometimes phoning can be intimidating and emailing is less intimidating than picking up a phone.
Sure.
And remembering that extension. Anybody else?
I have just a comment.
Go ahead, trustee Jordan.
Through your chair, Jennifer, I have been visiting 3 schools this week, and all 3 schools, so to say, staff especially were concerned, and so many parents have raised this concern that for the next school year, or these schools, 3 schools I have been visiting this week, say that they are getting lowest ever or the lower numbers of EAs for the identified special needs students. One school even said they have 35 special needs students and are getting next year only 5 EAs. So, when I try to find out the reason, then they say there's no funding and they can't do much. And parents are now just trying here and there, sending emails, and they are not very happy with the kind of responses they received, or they are not satisfied at all. So I don't know if this kind of situation can lead to more modified days in future, or I don't know what's going to happen if I see the communication from the parents. So a lot of people are concerned, even the staff members are concerned about that.
Thank you so much for raising that, and I would hope not that that doesn't lead to an increase in modified days, because it ought not. And I mean, we heard that specific example where schools were commenting that, we have the teacher's been away, And that teacher's really good with that student, so the teacher's off, and so we're just gonna shorten up the day, and those sorts of things should not be contributing to modified day. So it's a very complex process in terms of the EA allocation, and it's driven by student independence information, student independence forms. That's the number one consideration in terms of school EA allocation. So it's a bit more of a complex process, and we may need to dedicate, similar to the conversation we just had about modified day, we may need to have a similar conversation around the EA allocation process. Because you can't look at it in terms of a number, you have to look at it in terms of a profile. There's 5 students, and then there's a different 5 students, and there's a different 5 students, and there's a different 5 students. So we don't want to get into this idea that 5 equals this number of staff, right? There may be 5 students who they require a lot more than that, and there are 5 students and they may require less. So we don't, it's not numbers driven, and that's why I'm saying we do need to continue to raise these questions, and I'm glad that you're asking questions and encouraging the school to ask questions, because it's a complicated process. But what I always want to come back to, and what we always try to emphasize, is it's supposed to be student-centered. It's not a number, it's not a funding, it's supposed to be students first. That's the beginning of the conversation around that type of support. And the goal ultimately is student independence in as many cases as possible. It's not a lifetime of attachment to an educational system. The idea is, if we can move towards independence, you're doing more things, maybe it's not everything, but you're doing more things year over year independently. So that's also an important distinction to make. Some people say, well, I had the EA for 4 years and it was great, and now it's been reduced. But the question is, has there been growth? Has there been progress? It can't be, again, a question of, I had it, so I should always have it. If the goal is student independence and there's been growth and improvement, then reducing the EA support is a natural outcome of that, right? So we do need to just enter into those conversations. Thanks so much for raising that.
Wonderful. I just have a follow-up comment. I have 30 schools, and until now, I was able to visit around 20. Only one school, so except one school, all others said that they don't have enough EAs. They have to get help from lunchroom supervisors, from TAs or other support staff. So how is that when you look at the profiles, and still so many schools, they don't have enough EAs. They don't have enough support.
So I think, again, we have to look at each individual situation. We know that province-wide, we continue to have some staffing shortages. Right? We do not have an abundance of educational assistants who are available for schools. So it is a very specialized role. We want people to have the skills and the temperament to do the work. And they're not, again, readily available. Peel is such a huge area. We have challenges around availability. So if you're in Brampton, maybe you don't want to come down to Port Credit. You just, if you're not driving, things like that. So again, it's a complex piece to understand how the staffing may or may not be working in a school. But we are recognizing that as much as people are saying the pandemic is over, we continue to feel the effects of it. People are not working where they used to in some instances before. They've said, I want to be closer to home. I want to, I want a position where I can spend a certain number of days working from home, because that's still a possibility in some contexts, in some boards, where you could actually do some of that work virtually or in some other way. So it's important to know that it's a complex piece. I don't know, AD De Silva, if there's anything you wanted to add to that, but we're conscious of the variables here.
Yeah, through you, Chair, and thanks for the question as well. EAs, teachers, administrators, we're having staffing shortages across the board, and particularly around EAs, and certainly as Superintendent Reedy shared, coming out of the pandemic, it has not been easy. And so, and not just in education, many of you are outside of education, you're feeling those staffing situations in your own sectors of work. And the EA role is very gratifying, but it's also a very difficult job. And we need to acknowledge that. And so with the pandemic, we've had increased levels of student dysregulation. We've had kids who have been out of school for a number of years. And the impact that is showing within our classrooms, within our schools, and we're trying to address that on a number of different levels, including increased supports around mental health and so on and so forth. But and the EA, for potentially, I know this group has had some professional learning at this table, I believe, around EA allocation, but it's a finite number. So, for example, if there are, in September of 2022-23, there was a need for 100 EAs. The ministry provides funding for 100 EAs. If we get 100 more students, well, how many EAs do we have in the building? We still only have 100 EAs. And so what happens is the pie gets cut into smaller and smaller pieces. And so that is a challenge, and also a challenge in the way that the funding is delivered and the timing and so on and so forth. So there are challenges that way. We're trying to mitigate that. I know George behind me and his team is constantly taking those requests and reviewing those SIF forms and trying to figure out where those greatest needs are and trying to support where required. So it's a handful of different situations, Sajpal. Not only is it just around retention of EAs and recruiting EAs, but it's also around, keeping them in the classroom when they're dealing with so many complex situations. So it's a number of different pieces that we need to recognize and deal with, and we're trying to do our best, but there is no solution. In the past, that even the trustees at this table and in the past have supported the addition, and Susan's been here long-standing, additional EAs to the board graciously. And so that time is coming up. The budget is coming up, so we're hoping that the three of you here will support potentially another request for the need to support our most students and staff within our schools with that. But it's challenging. There's no question about the support that's required and what staff are dealing with at this particular time.
Thank you for asking that question. And I really, if you have a concern outside of the scope of what we're discussing in this special education meeting, I really strongly suggest that you go and you actually approach the staff. They're very willing to explain things and to give you the information that's being shared, like what was shared around the table about the EAs tonight. So yeah, go and ask questions, make those connections with people. And again, some of the reps who've been here a long time are familiar with doing this outside of the meeting, is going and meeting with the staff members and making those connections and having those conversations outside. So yeah, but thank you. Yeah, we're very aware of the EA issue. It's been mentioned several times. Yes. And saying that, I'd actually like to move on to the adjournment so that we can move to the staff-led consultation, because I'm just noting the time. It is where, yeah. So we are going to read we're going to get the instructions read, and then we'll do the adjournment and move on to the regular rooms.
Hi everyone, good evening. Again, my name is Kayla Prasad. I'm the Data Literacy and Knowledge Mobilization Facilitator here at Peel District School Board. I hope everyone's energized and ready to engage and talk. For the CDAC Town Hall tonight, I'm inviting you in community consultation for the multi-year plan as Peel District School Board is in the process of developing a plan that will determine the board's priorities and actions for the next several years. How this will work is we have 2 rooms prepared outside of these doors where folks will break out. We will have a list of questions that reflects both the ministry directives and the areas of focus for the board improvement and equity plan. Once folks are in rooms, you will see a flip chart, some markers, along with printed copies of questions for everyone. And I'm really hoping for you all to engage with one another and provide answers directly on the flip chart as a group. You can start with any question you feel like, go through the questions, see what maybe interests you. And you do not have to get through all of the questions. The data collected tonight will be used to inform the multi-year plan along with school and systems planning. For folks virtual, you'll have the opportunity to participate post-meeting via a survey. So you were not forgotten. And we also want this conversation to be organic. What that means is I won't be present in those spaces, but I will be here physically. So once done, please let me know and I will collect your flip charts. Any questions?
What rooms are we adjourning?
So just outside these doors, I think one is Cheltenham, I think.
Cheltenham calendar.
Yeah, so those 2 rooms.
So that way?
Yeah.
Is there a mechanism for dividing up like this?
How are we dividing up?
Well, I wasn't sure how many would show up today. So maybe an even split, if that works. So however many.
So what do you want to do? Just do 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2?
Sure. Sure. So how about we start from here? You'll be 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Is everyone in the back also participating?
No,
Those folks are
not
not
media folks are done.
They're done for today.
Media and governance are done.
Okay.
So Catherine and, so those 4 people are done.
Okay, lovely.
So,
Thank you.
Trustee Joe Hall, would you like to move for adjournment so we can move on to our?
Sure.
Wonderful. Who would like to second? Thank you, Jennifer. All in favor? We're adjourned, we're moving. Yay!